This is episode 6 of the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. I'm Spencer, and in this episode, Rob and I discuss the second season of Loki on Disney Plus, what we enjoyed, and where we want it to go from here. Welcome to another episode of the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. I'm Spencer, and I've got Rob with me tonight. We got some fun stuff planned for you.
Yes, we do.
So, we're going to talk about the Loki season 2, the series in general, as it unofficially wraps up, I guess,
hmm
um, and how that kind of impacts the Marvel Cinematic Universe from this point onward. But before we get into that, like we do, we're going to start with our recommendations. Um, I've been rewatching The Good Place. Um, it's only 4 seasons, and each season is 13 episodes long. So it's not a long commitment. And I definitely have my critiques, but it knew when to stop. It knew not to overstay its welcome. And it knew how to tell a story, um, flaws and all, and to just tell it instead of having 30 episodes of filler for 10 years.
hmm
So it's available on Netflix, and I mean I've written about it a couple times, and I got some more thoughts about it coming up on the blog at some point, but that's where I've been lately. Rob, what about you?
Awesome. Thanks, Spencer. Yeah, I love that. So it occurred to me to recommend something a little different. I've been enjoying this independent artist quite a bit just on social media, scrolling through Facebook. So her name is Andrea, and she has a page called Delicate Dots. And what she does, the art style she does is mandalas, um, which are, let me bring up my, hold on. Well, basically, mandalas are a geometric art form that has ancient roots and represents like ancient spiritual beliefs. Um, and I'm not an expert in it at all. I just really enjoy um sort of her explanation of her art process and then seeing the finished result. It's really satisfying to see the art that she creates. And I don't know, it's been maybe 6 months to a year that I think that I have been subscribed to this page, and I think it's just really cool that independent artists can sort of create this kind of content and reach a bigger audience. So I would check it out if you're into that kind of thing. So Andrea with Delicate Dots. So she has like YouTube, Facebook, all the socials.
I'll definitely include her link in bio in the show notes on the blog.
hmm
Kind of point our listeners towards her.
She's not sponsoring the show at all. I just, would figured I'd do her a favor. I know that, hundreds and thousands will flock to her after this recommendation on the podcast.
All fives and tens of people that subscribe to us at this point.
You're right.
Oh gosh. Um, um, it's funny because I know podcasts take a long time to build up steam, and we're definitely still amateurs at this.
And it's all good. We're having a good time.
Yeah, we're having fun. This be perfect for, I don't even know if I've told you this, but I'm taking our podcast episodes and turning them into YouTube videos. to make him more accessible to the people who um, you know, don't want to deal with Spotify or whatever. They just want to, but they'll have YouTube on in the background. So
Yeah,
this would be a nice one to, you know, nice still to put on the screen during the podcast episode. But
nice.
still working on translating our first episode into YouTube video. So
Mm,
probably it'll be a little while till we get to this one.
that's fair. That's fair.
Um, but yeah, today, um, as we're recording this, the um, it's always a little bit of a timey-wimey situation because we record episodes in advance and then don't always release them right away. But I think this one is going to be the one of the quickest turnaround times that we'll have. Um, the season finale is not even going to be 2 weeks old by the time we release this episode, so be one of the quickest turnaround times that we have for the podcast. So hope that means we're getting better at this.
Right. It'll give our audience and myself time to finish this season if you haven't already. Like me. I think I'm on episode 3 or 4. Probably. I think I finished episode 4. But Spencer,
Oh,
you've watched the entire season 2, right?
oh yeah, I think I was up with my 9 month old the night it was released came out. So I got I watched it like hours after it premiered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nice.
So it's a it was definitely an interesting finale, and I am there's going to be spoilers here, and Rob's already been warned that
Mm-hmm.
the episodes that he has not finished, um, he's going to get some spoilers along the way here. Um, but that's just how this life goes, I guess.
It's all
Um,
good.
well, why don't we start with we both kind of picked 3 points of where we want to go from here, or what we want to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you take your first one about Loki and hit the female Loki variant, who they in the series they call Sylvie. So Loki and Sylvie.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. Just a quick note. I I feel pretty neutral about spoilers generally because I am still interested in seeing exactly how things happen. And generally when there's like, you know, information that is, there's maybe like a big twist at the end or something like that, it generally doesn't really ruin shows or movies for me. That's just a funny thing about me. But yeah, so Loki and Sylvie, like I really liked their relationship in season 1 and the way Sylvie's character was handled especially. I really like sort of the menacing um villainous character who is in the shadows being pursued or being discussed by a lot of different characters and then gets, introduced maybe in the middle of things after there's been a lot of action. And, pretty much everything in season 1 revolved around her for the first half at least. And so
Yeah, at
far from
least.
what I've seen, I think they've handled it pretty well. Like the ending of season 1 where there was sort of just the like like they ended season 1 with a big rift between Loki and Sylvie. They didn't agree on how to, handle the whole thing with Kong. That's his name, right? The guy
In
at the end of
Loki, they
time.
just call him He Who Remains, but when he
Yeah,
appeared in Ant-Man, they called him King.
King,
So,
yeah.
and in season 2, we see another variant of him called uh, Victor Timely, but yeah, they're all pretty interchangeable in my mind, just different variants of each other, just like, you know, Tom Holland's Spider-Man and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man,
Hmm.
Loki, Sylvie, it's all just different variants of the same character.
Yeah,
At least that's how I'm
yeah,
led to believe led to understand these things work.
yeah, exactly. Thank you. And then so in season two, so one of my favorite scenes so far has been when Loki, Sylvie, and Victor Timely are in that um Ferris wheel compartment,
Hmm.
and Loki and Sylvie are very, passionately trying to defend, what's happening. Later on, they end up like in Victor Timely's, you know, island lab, whatever it is. Like those scenes I felt were handled really well because um their two different sides of things were clashing, very strongly. Um so I really appreciate it when you see characters fighting for something that they believe in, and it's very clear, and there's not any clear resolution to what's happening. It's you know
When you add into
it's
that there's no clear right or wrong with this whole thing, that they both
mhm,
have good, powerful motivations, and despite them both being Lokis and the god of mischief, they both have this that very good, like Loki wants to keep the like he's genuinely scared of this multiversal war,
mhm,
and Sylvie just wants to enable free will. Like both of those are good things.
mhm.
And we may or may not get into all of what that entails, but you know, they like you said, they both have powerful. Um, how'd you phrase it?
They're just in conflict. Like their
Yeah.
conflict is driving the action of the story. And I love what you said about there not being a really clear right or wrong.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, I think that Sylvie is a little bit more driven by her anger and her past trauma. She doesn't feel like a totally reliable um narrator. I don't know
Yeah.
how you would say that, but like Loki, it's more out of character for him to be defending somebody or standing up for their, you know, maybe it's out of self-preservation or, whatnot. Like you know, hardcore fans that are like super following Marvel are going to be like rolling their eyes at me a little bit, but just as somebody who's like, um, I'm enjoying the series, and at the same time I'm not a super huge Marvel fan in terms of like really really diving in and like um knowing all the background and the details and everything. But like I think it's really interesting. Like Loki's character to me feels like somebody who is working on turning over a new leaf. He's had sort of a revelation, and all the series is sort of following up on that, where he understands that the multiverse is, there's this delicate balance there, and he basically accidentally has a shot at um life again, after seeing how he,
Hmm.
an alternate version of him was killed by Thanos. So yeah, I think it's really interesting where it feels sort of like Loki is like he's on edge, he's a little unhinged, but defending Victor Timely is sort of, maybe part of some kind of redemption, or just like at least him standing up for something that he wouldn't normally because he has a new sense of purpose about it. And the fact that Sylvie is adamantly um trying to prevent Victor Timely from becoming king. She's trying to prevent,
Mhm.
anybody from continuing to like prolong the life of the what do they call it again? The the big organization,
The
the
TVA.
the TVA. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Well, and
yeah.
this kind of ties directly into one of the um, points that I sent you, and
Mhm.
but this is where the spoilers begin for you. Um,
Yeah, it's all good.
in episode five, it was I swear it could have been a little bit of a plot out of a you know anime or something, because I swear the plot and revelation of episode five, season two, episode five, science slash fiction, was that it seemed like it was Loki and the power of friendship. Um, because this version of Loki, which started at the out of Avengers Endgame, like the same 2012 Loki that was bent on conquering Earth with the Chitauri, none of Ragnarok, you know, um, none of the Dark Elves, just straight out of New York City. He gets this revelation. Like you said, he saw the alternate version of himself get killed by Thanos. But even then, he was like craving the power of the TVA, or however you want to go about it. He, in over the course of season one, he had multiple attempts or multiple experiences that basically, well, literally, in a way, I suppose, had him look at himself in the mirror. First with seeing that Loki that was killed by Thanos, but then seeing variants of himself in Sylvie, and then at the end of time, he had the kid Loki and I think they called him classic Loki, um, played by Richard Grant. It was a big deal, as well as all the other nameless or titleless Lokis that appeared at the end of time. And there's there's like and I can't forget about Loki Gator.
Right?
Oh, you can't forget about the Loki Gator.
Love
Um,
some Loki Gator.
but yeah, he saw all these variations of himself, and right as he was trying to be the best version of himself alongside Sylvie, which falling in love with your own variant, that's a certain kind of narcissism. Um, but that's a I don't think that was um on our agenda for tonight. But by the end of season one, he cares about Sylvie, he cares about to whatever extent the multiverse, and he cares about Mobius. He's genuinely got friends by the end of season one. And then by the end of season two, um, particularly in episode five, he's jumping through time as the multiverse is like dissolving, um, for reasons we'll address in a moment. And all he wants to do is protect his friends and have these friends. He doesn't want to lose these people that he finally feels accepted by. And it enables him to kind of tap into the power of the time slipping, which they never really addressed by the end of season two, even why he's time slipping exactly. But, you know, with all the time travel and stuff, I'm sure there's some rationale that the writers could give as to why the time slipping, what caused the time slipping in the first place. But he learns to control it, and because of the bond he feels with the people he wants to save. So, like I said, it sounds like something out of an anime or some,
Yeah.
some the power of friendship, but it shows, from compared to the Loki that we met in the first Thor movie, compared to that one, and even compared to the one that died in Infinity War, um, just a lot of growth has happened in the meantime, to the point that at the end of season two, he all but sacrifices himself to save the multiverse. Um, they kind of left it open ended with a one with how he saved the multiverse, and two with how, like, his state, like if he's alive, if he could come back. Um, it's been hinted that this iteration of Loki is done. Um, Tom Hiddleston kind of made it sound like he was done with the series or with the character, but anything's possible. These
Mhm.
are superhero canon. This is a superhero canon, you know. Crazier things have happened,
Yeah.
but it was almost like Loki was healing the timeline, or the timelines plural, um, in an attempt and with the intent to save his friends. That's all he cared about in the end,
Mhm.
which is kind of beautiful and kind of very tragic.
I agree. I think Loki is a pretty tragic character, especially because of events in the Avengers movie. He's kind of irredeemable. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm pretty sure I remember him just straight up murdering people,
Hmm.
and like,
I think I have this image of him like stabbing someone in the eye with his Loki staff
yes, that's right. Yep, he's
in
he's trying to
Germany.
he's stealing so what was he stealing from that
I think he
museum
was
in the middle of
stealing
the
his eye
Oh yeah,
for
he
the
needed
eye
his eye
scanner.
to get through the security system. Yep. Yeah, so he's done some pretty irredeemable things. And
But this is
so
fiction, so we can redeem anything.
yeah, I mean, maybe.
I mean, my wife has been watching Once Upon a Time, and there are villains redeemed in that show that in real life they'd be like serial killers, but we can still redeem them in
Right.
these fantastical stories. So,
Yeah. I
uh,
mean, I guess the tragic part is that you see a character like this genuinely do something that is selfless, like they're putting themselves in harm's way or like risking their life or maybe giving their life in order to save other people. So it's like this sense of like I'm actually a little moved by the good thing that they're doing, and at the same time like what they've done in the past was, inexcusable, that kind of thing.
right.
So I mean, yeah, I think it's really, really hard for a show to really pull that thing off and actually make you root for a character. Loki is, I don't know, he has a weird likability, and I kind of just like hand wave the stuff from, the first Avengers movie a little bit because it's just like, well, if I think too much or like take what he did a little. if I take that very seriously and, have more of a real life perspective on it, it's like, well, I can't even enjoy the Loki show at all because it's like, I can't root for you. You're,
Five
anyway,
minutes ago,
but
you were trying to take over New York.
exactly, you were trying to take over New York. You like, murdered people for no reason. It's kind of like a, yeah. Um, but if you kind of just like allow fiction to be fiction and, suspend disbelief and try to enjoy the show for what the writers are trying to do with it, then it's like, okay, actually, I think it's, the idea of redemption is always a good, you know, it usually makes for a good plot when it's handled well. And I think, they've done a good job with it. That wasn't even a point that I wanted to make,
Yeah.
but just following up on what you were talking about a minute ago.
Well, whenever I have that inner discussion with myself, like I said, when my wife's watching Once Upon a Time, or when I'm watching Loki, or any of these, Darth Vader, that they're horrible, done horrible things, but they are redeemable. In fiction, I'm like, no, they're not redeemable. They can't do this. But in real life, especially coming from our religious perspective, I kind of have to also believe like even these horrible people are redeemable.
Yeah,
How? I have no idea. And that's why I'm glad it's not me that's going to be judging people on Judgment Day.
yeah,
but
yeah,
but it also gives us an idea. I think we have this instinctive feeling, this instinctive knowledge um, that people are redeemable. Whether they choose to be or not is another question. But
hmm,
um, I don't know. I think there's something powerful about that.
yeah. I
Um,
agree. And I think it's like an interesting choice when that's the character that is at the center of the whole series. Like the
mhm.
character that's not really redeemable, but the arc of you know, their, transformation through the story is to go from somebody who would do these horrible things, inexcusable, horrific things, and go through a transformation where they would do wonderful, you know, very admirable, amazing things. Um, yeah. And like I mean, that is what we hope for. That is, what we try to do. Like that's, you know, my everyday job is sort of trying to give people opportunities, to get out of really, really challenging situations or, help people create that transformation. So it's kind of like, the details and like the background, like we can't necessarily judge without knowing, like we don't know
Yeah.
the context. We don't know what challenges people were going through and we don't know what they're capable of in the future in the end of the day. So it's,
Mhm. We can't
nice to
fully
have a job.
disregard it all, but
Yeah.
we can't let that limit them either.
Yeah.
Humanity is a complex subject.
Yeah, we're getting in the weeds.
So, so let's move on to a couple characters that you'd mentioned that really stood out to you. Um, Owen Wilson's Mobius, and then Miss Minutes.
Okay, yeah. Um, yeah, I think Owen Wilson is really interesting. And so, I mean, it's Mobius's character, Mobius. He's kind of resisting an identity crisis. Like the people in the TVA have to decide what they're going to do with the information that what they've been told for millennia apparently was a lie. Like the TVA wasn't founded by, these three, you know, godlike
Timekeepers.
beings, yeah. Um and so just from what I've seen in the show, he's Mobius says things like, "I like my life. My life is fine. I don't need to know about who I was before or if I have a family or anything. Everything's fine." Which is such a funny response, and I think that is what most people would do in that situation, honestly. As the viewer, you're looking at it and you're like, "You are insane. Like that is a terrible,
Yeah.
terrible way to respond to this." Like, forget the TVA. They're ridiculous. But for him, he's been there for such a long time. He's a happy guy. He's a decent guy. And
Well, and then you take into account that like he was like the first one at the TVA to like rebel back in season one. And then when given the opportunity to traverse the timeline and figure out where did he actually come from, he chooses not to, at least at first. So it's a,
mhm,
which I think goes along with what you're saying, that like, hey, this, it seems like a straightforward idea to just, and we do later in season two see where he came from and his family, which as a dad, I think it's going to pull at your heartstrings. Um,
mhm,
but when actually put in that situation of having to confront um, those different realities, the life you thought you knew and the life that could have been, what's harder? Is it easier to just go along not knowing, or is it, or is it worth confronting what could have been?
mhm. Yeah, another one of those ambiguous situations. What's
Hmm.
what's really the right thing to do at that point?
Yeah.
And it's kind of it reminds me of Star Trek a little bit, just how there's to sort of shift gears, like Star Trek was, you know, has just so many brilliant social commentaries that are
Hmm.
like pretty apparent if you're reading between the lines, but it makes it more palatable because, you know, it's all fantasy. Um, and with this, it's like, what do you do when there's some crisis? Like you learn something about an organization or, like a social institution that you've put your trust in, that you've depended on, relied on, and then you learn new information about like the leaders or the founders or things, and then there's cognitive dissonance there. And
Hmm.
what do you do with that information? So I think that's a really, really interesting dilemma, and I'm glad that they are emphasizing that in the show. And it's funny because like as I was watching the show, it was just sort of bothering me. But then as I was thinking about getting ready for um talking about the show for the podcast, I I started to like the whole idea more, and just hoping that um when I finish the series, like hoping it's handled in a way that is enjoyable.
I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
I think you'll enjoy where Mobius ends up, but it's a definitely more complicated, and or at least more, maybe nuanced is the right word, but it definitely was not an easy decision, as I mean, it took all of season two for him to make the decision.
Hmm, hmm.
Um, Up and go straight from Mobius into Miss Minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, basically what I have to say about Miss Minutes is I love the villain that she became in the episode with Victor Timely. I loved it. I
So freaking creepy. Like,
super
do you remember
creepy.
that stalker girlfriend meme?
Is
Like
it
the
is it the
creepy
girl
over.
holding the knife or I don't know. I mean,
There's this like
I
classic
yeah.
meme that just like the overbearing girlfriend. Um, and
Have
she
to put
the
a
overly attached girlfriend is what people call it, and that's how I kind of visualize
mm,
um Miss Minutes after that episode, just like if I can't have you, no one can.
yep, yep, and
Also brings to
yeah.
mind um a line from a bad lip reading video, but that's probably too big of a tangent even for me right now. But there you go. I sent you
Um,
the meme that I was
okay. Let me see. Okay. All right.
you seeing it?
I see it. I see it. I
So
mean,
so for any of our listeners, pause, Google overly attached girlfriend meme, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But
yeah. Um, so I love that we don't really know what Miss Minutes is or what she's capable of. There's kind of an all-powerful quality to her.
mhm.
Like Victor Timely's able to like shut her off or whatever he did, in that episode when it's just him and her in his lab. So it's like that also makes a really good villain too, where there's like a really clear limit to her power, but at
Mhm.
the same time there's a mystery of like if that mechanism breaks or if they don't have access to it, if she gains control over it for some reason, like then what is she capable of? She can just sort of appear and disappear anywhere she wants, and like
Which is
she
kind of what
increases in
happened.
size. Yeah, yeah. So that's one thing I'm excited for as I, continue and finish the series. Like, what's she gonna do? She's capable of, doing some stuff, and she's highly motivated to get her way. She's been waiting a very, very long time to, you know, obtain a body and, to have what she wants. So,
Well, and that's one of the things that honestly I was kind of disappointed about that her and Judge Renslayer we were built up in those first few episodes and then kind of just seemed like they were tossed off to the side for the last couple episodes. I expected them to have a bit from the end of the series.
yeah, yeah, I can see that. The other thing I wonder too is it's like, okay, Miss Minutes can do all this stuff. What was in it for her to be running the TVA for all those years? Like, did she just get the satisfaction from basically being in charge and holding all the cards, and that was good enough for her? But now the TVA is sort of falling apart, and like things have changed, so she's taking an opportunity that she, didn't have before. I don't know.
I think it might be just, I think honestly it might just be that an AI that got too smart for herself.
Yeah,
Come on,
yeah, or
guys,
maybe,
beware AI. Don't let
yeah,
AI control your life. I think there's a message right there. Not
hmm
one that was intended, but I'm gonna say it anyways.
yeah, right, right, yeah. And I don't know if later on in the series it'll explain that like he who remains was sort of keeping her in check and like preventing her AI from going out of control, but yeah,
I'll
it's
let
not in
you,
control anymore.
yeah, I'll let you judge for yourself when you get there.
Yeah, cool, cool. Well, that's pretty much what I had to say about Miss Minutes, so we can switch over to
Yeah, let's
temporal.
talk. So I swear, the whole of season two, they're trying to fix this temporal loom that OB has like all these plans, and I kept asking myself like if the multiverse is such a natural occurrence, like He Who Remains made it sound like, then does it why do we need the temporal loom now? Like when the TVA was trying to keep just the sacred timeline, the temporal loom kind of makes sense. But now that we're allowing the multiverse and at least some of these branch timelines to exist, why does the temporal loom matter? And it actually, and maybe one of our listeners can, you know, email us or message us and tell me something that I didn't understand about the temporal loom. But the whole time during those first, like the during, I think it was not until the season finale that they kind of um explain the temporal loom, but I'm just thinking the whole time, what's the point of this thing if the just exists? Why do we need a temporal loop? And come to find out in the season finale, it's it's the temporal loom is the failsafe to prune the branches that he who remains one pruned. And so I'm like, so we spent all this time trying to fix the temporal loom that didn't need to be there, and it's just going to blow up the timeline anyways. So
Hmm.
I don't know. I feel like there's more to that mythos than was explained. Because it was the series ended with Loki kind of, in my mind, healing, like we said before, like healing the timelines with the power of friendship or whatever. You know, it's a like if the multiverse is so as scary as He Who Remains made it sound, and it should just happen naturally. It shouldn't need someone to heal it or keep it in check. So if you understand what the temporal loom is supposed to be doing and why it needed to be fixed, you let me know. Because the best I can think of is that the TVA couldn't exist without the temporal loom. But even
Hmm.
then, I'm like, if we're letting the timeline run free, if we're letting the multiverse run free, why do we need to worry about the TVA? Why not just evacuate the place?
Hmm.
Um, in the end, in the closing part of the last episode, they kind of make it seem, without explicitly saying so, that instead of the TVA being there to prune branches, the TVA is more watching for Kang and his variants, kind of trying to keep him in check more than trying to keep the sacred timeline. Um, so in the end, I guess there is a purpose for the TVA, but for 5.5 episodes, I couldn't understand why the temporal loom was such a big deal.
Hmm.
But something that I felt like it could have been explained or explored better.
Yeah, that's interesting to think of, like what you just said, that these people from the TVA that are still like aggressively pruning branches and preserving the sacred timeline, like it's all about preventing all of King's variants from escaping and like wreaking havoc across
Even that was
the
kind of vague.
multiverse.
Like, are they just watching for King, or are they pruning the branches that King comes from? Like, even that was. I mean,
Hmm.
with where season 2 ended, the only one King variant had really come across their radar, and it was they kind of allude to it being the King that appeared in the third Ant-Man movie. So
Hmm.
they only and the only reason we know that is they called it Earth 616 adjacent. So I'm like the quantum realm of Earth 616, which Doctor Strange established as our main universe. But
Hmm.
it's the whole concept of the TVA and the timeline in season two just I liked but when at the same time I liked season two better than season one, so I don't know how
Hmm.
it was a complicated emotion there.
Yeah.
Because I felt like at the end of season one, we had it was we were open to the What If series, which was just announced to have its second season premiere in December. 9 days of 9 episodes, I believe it said. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
but because of Sylvie killing he who remains, we were led to believe, okay, what if is that's where what if comes from. That's where the Spider-Man variants come from. That's where the Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness comes from. Heck, and before we started recording, I kind of alluded to this, but like that's where the Marvel Netflix series characters could have come from, you know? The Netflix series could be its own strand of the multiverse.
Hmm.
Um, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. could be its own strand of the multiverse. Yeah, depending on how far you want to take it. The Fox X-Men movies could be another strand, or like I swear, six different strands with how they did times travel in those movies. But it opens it up for like everything to be canon. But then in season two, it's like, but let's rein it in and maintain this temporal loom that doesn't have a very well-defined purpose anymore.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. It almost has like a MacGuffin feel to me, where it's like we just need a thing to create tension and to give characters something to do.
yeah,
Where it's
so
like we just rely on the fact that the characters care about it and are afraid to, you know, generate the storyline. And
yeah.
what it actually does, we don't know, and we're not going to explain it.
Well, and when it was explained, it's a failsafe. It was his failsafe, which I kind of think now that you're saying that, like I feel like I would have been more invested in it if they would have known from earlier on that like this
Mm,
isn't helping us. This is the this failsafe is a threat to the multiverse. So we have to learn to control and contain it so that the multiverse doesn't implode. Yeah, I feel like I would have cared more about the temporal loom if I'd have known it was a failsafe sooner.
yeah,
But
yeah, that
instead,
makes
I'm
sense.
led to believe for 5.5 episodes that fixing the temporal loom was going to fix the multiverse instead of the opposite.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know.
Like I feel like the first few episodes gave the impression that if the temporal loom fails, then like it'll be like an atomic bomb going off. It's going to, destroy the multiverse.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know. Again, call to our listeners. If you understand the temporal loom better than I did, message us on Instagram, message us on Facebook because I'm at a loss. But I still enjoyed the season.
yeah, you enjoyed it more than season one. Yeah, I'm intrigued. So I guess there's only 6 episodes, so
Mm,
I think I only have two more to go. So,
mm. Well, then the
well,
only other
cool.
thing I had was I wanted to kind of discuss where do we go from here? You know,
Mm,
Loki has preserved the multiverse. You'll get to see how he uses the power of friendship to preserve the multiverse despite the temporal loom failsafe. Um, but the thing that it does leave some things just somewhat open ended. Um, the TVA is watching for more Kangs. Loki is not dead, but he's in this like stasis. as I guess Marvel's kind of termed him the God Loki, which I kind of thought they were all God Loki, but okay. Um,
Mhm.
it's so we'll see what happens because we were supposed to have the Kang Dynasty as our fifth Avengers movie, but I don't know if it's, you know, creative differences or Jonathan Majors, who plays Kang and He Who Remains, is in the middle of some legal trouble, from what I
Mm.
understand. So I don't know if Marvel's doing a, you know, like the media did with Johnny Depp when he was going through his legal trouble, if they're trying to just kind of brush that off to the side until it's all resolved.
Mm.
But it, the reports and articles I'm seeing the last few days make it sound like the reports I'm seeing the last few days are saying that Marvel's moving away from the Kang storyline, which I mean, the writers are making it sound like, oh yeah, we're satisfied with how this story ended. And I'm just thinking, you're what? Like you set up this like Council of Kings in Ant-Man 3, and you set up the multiversal war in Loki, with all his variants. And I mean, I've only known outside of Loki and Ant-Man, I've only known Kang in I think one Marvel cartoon that I watched, but he was a big deal that took all the Avengers to beat. So I suspect there's more going on um than just creative differences, but it is what it is, I suppose. So I'm curious what where Marvel will go with any of these loose threads and if they'll try to pick them up anywhere along the way. But then again, they haven't exactly addressed the giant celestial that was left peeking out through the clouds in Eternals. So
Mhm.
it's not like there's not a bunch of loose ends that we just choose to ignore in the Marvel universe as it is.
Yeah, it would be interesting to hear how that whole conversation goes behind the scenes. They have, you know, a lot of lore to draw from to decide, which direction they want to go. And yeah, I
I
don't
just hope
know.
that if it is because of Jonathan Major's legal trouble, that I hope they do it tastefully and they take care of it all, um, in a good way. Um, Unlike, I just remember Johnny Depp being recast for the Fantastic Beasts movies and it just like ignoring the fact that all of a sudden Grindelwald looks completely different.
Hmm.
It's a magical world. They could have had any number of explanations as to why his appearance was different, and they made it seem like that was how he looked the whole time. But
Hmm.
so I'm hoping Marvel kind of handles it better than that. Um, I'm hoping they don't just let these threads just hang perpetually. But then again, like you said, they got so much lore to pull from, they can pretty much do whatever they want.
Hmm.
Um, there's rumors
Yeah.
of the Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom being brought in, but then again, we've had rumors of Fantastic Four ever since. Um, I remember rumors about Reed Richards during WandaVision, and that didn't happen.
Mm.
But we'll see. I just hope it's well written. That's all I want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever they end up doing, I just hope it's well written.
Yeah, man.
Thanks for joining us for this discussion on Loki. Let us know your thoughts. You can find us on our socials and keep checking in. See you later, guys.
All right. Have a good night.
Thanks for listening to the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. We're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but we don't represent the church in any official capacity. Remember to subscribe to the podcast. You can see our show notes and blog posts on latterdaysaintgeeks.com, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Latter-day Saint Geeks. Music was provided courtesy of David Schradel.